We can be found on YouTube, iTunes, and Spotify. Like, share, subscribe, and leave us a comment down below. Now, on with the show.
Okay. We'll do it live. Fucking thing. No. We'll do it live. Fuck it.
Death Holler is a horror cast created by two true horror fans to bring to the table your favorite horror films. Topics include, but are not limited to, historical horror, gore, the occult, and terror. Listener discretion is advised.
So, LlaReyna. Been a while since we've actually had a full-on chat, actual conversation. The last episode we did was the kind of an overview and everything of the Sabrina, Chilling Adventures of Sabrina show. Anything that you've gotten into since then as far as like any horror-related stuff or anything like that, or?
Yeah, I feel like this is kind of more news than anything, but I have really been interested in the Resident Evil Village game. Like, I've been obsessed with it.
Besides the meme pictures that you're showing?
Besides the meme pictures, like, I've been watching people do walkthroughs of what's been released so far. They call it the Maiden something. I don't know. But yeah, just people doing walkthroughs and kind of seeing what's in there. And it's kind of cool because, I know Resident Evil kind of veered away from just zombies really early on. Actually, they had some mutants, if nothing else.
Yeah, that was
another crazy.
That was actually in the first game. They started out with like the mutated crocodile, alligator, whatever it was, like in the very first game.
Oh my God,
they kind of,
so cool.
But
the zombies were always like you'll always just refer, when you hear Resident Evil, you're immediately going to think Umbrella Corporation. You're going to think of Raccoon City. You're going to think of zombies. So the fact that they got this really cool kind of gothic like village, just, it looks like, I don't know, Romanian of sorts from what I've been kind of researching. And I'm sorry, but I'm obsessed with that big titty vampire. Forgive me.
I think a lot of internet guys will be obsessed with it too once it makes its a debut.
And I'm not saying that 8 foot tall isn't tall. People are saying she's between 8 and 9 feet tall. And I'm only 5 foot and some change on a good day. So I get that is like double my height. But the way she has to lean through doorways and she could just pick you up with one hand makes me think that 8 foot tall, like she's not 8 foot tall.
Right.
I just don't see how that would work.
Well, I don't know anything about it. So what kind of platform is it on? Like, what kind of game is it? Is it like the old ones? Is it on the new consoles? Like, what's going on with it?
You know what? I think it's going to be across platforms, but I don't know all of them, obviously. I don't expect to see it on Nintendo. Hold on. I'm going to pull it up real quick. You see, as soon as I type in Resident Evil, my phone puts Village Vampire Lady.
There you go. She's already gaining
Thanks,
popularity.
Google, for stalking me. Okay, so gameplay. Oh, there's just a bunch of videos. System requirements. I heard PC. They're going to have PC.
Okay.
Version of it. And yeah, I'm not really getting any, where it's going to be. Hold on. What does it say? PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X, and Series S, and Microsoft Windows.
Okay.
So
I feel
some of the newer consoles.
I feel a lot better about it because when I saw the name of it, I don't know, my mind instantly went to like mobile app game, and I'm like, yeah,
Oh yeah. That wouldn't have been fun.
Yeah, no, they're usually
There's
not.
no way they would have made Big Titty Vampire Lady look good on a mobile.
Well, yeah, probably not. Some of the newer mobile games are really cranking the graphics up, but yeah, it'd be better on the consoles if you're going for that.
Yeah, so now that we spent like frickin' 4 minutes talking about that, what about yourself? What have you been getting into?
Well, I was really disappointed, like I said, about the Lovecraftian stuff and Sabrina, so I had to, get that bad taste out of my mouth by me and my wife played a card game called the Arkham Horror Living Card Game, and we played the end of the first scenario, like it leads you into it, like you play a couple of investigators. There's like some ghouls that have been attacking Arkham, and you're trying to investigate. And basically what it amounts to is in the very last scenario, you're kind of wandering around the woods trying to find where the cult is joining together to bring the the devourer from below, I think is the name of the creature, and it ultimately we ended up we killed it, sending it. Well, we didn't kill. We sent it back to wherever it came from. But my character went stark raving mad in the process, and my wife's character barely survived. So I guess that was pretty good
Just
for
a
a
typical Wednesday, right?
Yeah, that's pretty good for a Lovecraftian game, I guess. And but I mean, it was I don't know. It fit the genre obviously better than what we saw in Sabrina. And then since then I've also watched a couple of classic movies that. One of them I'd seen before. It's called The Wraith. It's definitely going to be on something and on Attack of the Bees at some point in the future.
Wait.
Not
I have to spell it out. Is it The Wraith, like Wraith?
Exactly. It's
okay.
It's an 80s movie. Charlie Sheen is the main actor in it, although he's not in the movie very much. It's got Randy Quaid as like this kooky sheriff that is kind of investigating, and it's an interesting movie. I saw it a few years back, and I was interested in it and decided to rewatch it, and it's pretty good B movie, so we'll probably bring it up again at some point. And then I decided to watch the Omega Man.
Sounds pretty good, actually.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I mean, not to get into the details about it, but basically it's Charlie Sheen's character is kind of he's kind of appeared out of nowhere. He's a new guy in town, and he starts and there's also another character that's going around like challenging these douchebags in town to like these races, and they all end up dying, and it all kind of ties in together, and there's a big reveal that they're about it, all of that. And so it's got this weird, like it's like the typical 80s movie where it's got more of a 50s vibe to it, because it seems like any movie from the 80s, like the characters, it's almost like they're living in the 50s to wait, the stereotypes and everything that goes along with it. And it's set out in like some desert setting, and it feels so weird because like it's so remote, and like there's nothing, like that town is like some throwback to the 50s that that still exists somehow in the time of the 80s. I don't know. It's got all this weird stuff going on, but it's an interesting movie.
You know what that reminds me of, kind of, is Sometimes They Come Back.
It does.
Or was that? No, that was straight up 50s, wasn't it?
It was straight up 50s. This one the funny thing about this one is the main character who's doing the racing is driving this thing called the Interceptor, or the Wraith, or whatever they want to call it, and it's like this super futuristic car that looks like it could have came from like 2000 or later. It looks like Elon Musk might have designed it or something, but it was like but I mean it's got that, I mean, but it still has that 50s vibe. You can't get away from it in a lot of those 80s movies. It's just like there's some movies now that are trying to go for the 80s vibe. I feel like, a lot of the 80s stuff had the 50s vibe. It's just, the generation at the time was, I guess, nostalgic, and they threw a lot of that in there. But so it's an interesting movie. It also has Clint Howard in it, a very small part by him, and he looks really goofy, so more so than usual. There's another movie I watched called The Omega Man.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, Charlton Heston. I hadn't seen it, to be perfectly honest with you. It'd been like, I always seen like references to it. It's one of those movies that I knew all about the movie without even having watched it. It was that, iconic, and it lives up to everything that I dreamed it would be. It's actually, in my opinion, one of the better visions of an apocalyptic setting that I've seen. I mean, like, that movie really does,
especially from the time it came from.
Yeah, it's got a lot of desolation in it. I mean, it's just one of those movies that, everywhere he goes, there's dead bodies somewhere in the background. Everything's dead, dead. The world's dead that he's living in, except for, the ghouls that are giving him hell at night. So it's a cool movie. I mean, I'd seen the other movies or the movie it was kind of remaking, which is The Last Man on Earth, I believe is the name of it, with Vincent Price. I'd seen that before, and of course they're all versions of I Am Legend, which was later redone into a Will Smith movie that I absolutely hate, but that'll be a topic for another day, another episode. But
wait, you hated I Am Legend?
I did not like the Will Smith version, and it's probably because I read
But you knew that was like a take from Omega Man. Like, it's not exact at all.
It's not, and it's supposed to be based more on the book that I think Richard Matheson is the author, but the book is, I mean, if you've read the book and then you watch the Will Smith movie, I don't know. I can forgive the other versions that are out there. They tried their own takes on what the book did, but there's something about the CGI monsters in the Will Smith one that just got on my nerves so bad.
Oh, okay. I can see that.
And I don't know, his character, I mean, not that Charlton Heston's character was anything like this, because he wasn't. Like, the character in the book is supposed to be like this brilliant scientist who's, trying his best to figure out some kind of cure, even though it's like, years after the fact. And, but like, I never bought Will Smith as being that character. Like, he's just, I saw him as, like the character he always plays, Big Willie style, I just never, he never sold it.
Oh man. Okay. I can see how that would get in the way.
Yeah. And Charlton Heston didn't play that character either, but he wasn't trying to play that character. His character was more about, I'm a ex-military man. I'm just going to go around killing shit, and driving, fancy cars. So it kind of fit.
Yeah. I mean, especially if it's following the book. So,
yeah.
Well, we watched a movie that has the potential to bring on another kind of apocalypse.
What's that?
And that is in the form of technically a Nephilim again.
Oh, yes. Well, with regards to that, I think I hear some visitors. I think it's time to cue the music.
All right, we'll cue the music.
Hello and welcome back to the Death Holler podcast. It's a new year in the holler, and what better way to celebrate than to welcome a new life to this world? After all, what does each change of the calendar and every new birth represent but the possibility of renewal and hope for humanity? Today we meet little Andy Woodhouse. He might not be the bundle of joy his mama expected, and he's quite possibly the spawn of evil incarnate, but that doesn't mean he has to be all bad, does it? As always, I'm your host, the Reverend Dr. Death, and this is episode 4, Rosemary's Baby. Joining me on the old spirit box is full-time ghost, part-time caretaker to wayward children, LlaReyna. How you doing, LlaReyna?
I love them children.
Oh, I know. So, are you excited for today's conversation, today's movie?
Kind of, yeah. I mean, obviously we got the movie behind our belt, and I definitely have a lot to say about it, and lots of cool, I have literally a chunk of history into like the curse really of the movie, but there's like so many curses surrounding this film, and I know you got bits of trivia, so I don't know how, this is going to be a real interesting take because there's a lot to talk about.
Yeah, there's quite a bit to this movie. I mean, culturally, the actual real life drama that surrounded it, that's kind of creepy in its own right, and just the film itself, I mean, there's just a ton to discuss with it. So,
definitely. Well, let's get into it then.
Well, before we get into it, there's no Attack of the Bees this episode. For those who might be interested, I had a choice for this Attack of the Bees, a good companion piece to this film, but I feel like it's a good enough film on its own that it deserved its own little breakout episode, so be looking out for that. That would be a special presentation about the House of the Devil, Ty West film. But there is a little bit of news that I wanted to cover before we get into Rosemary's Baby. The first bit of news, which I found interesting, and I'm actually excited for this one, is Edgar Wright, famous director for Shaun of the Dead, is returning to the horror genre this year with a new film called Last Night in Soho. And it's currently set to be released on October 22nd, 2021. And it's starring Anya Taylor-Joy, which we have discussed previously on the episode about the Vivitch. And interestingly enough, her co-star is Thomasin McKenzie.
Oh my God.
I had to put this in here. When I saw the name and the fact that Anya Taylor-Joy was, I was like, okay, Anya's with Thomason this time. Okay.
Interesting.
Thomason McKenzie's a younger actress who's recently was in the movie Jojo Rabbit, and she's supposed to be in the Top Gun Maverick movie that's coming out.
Okay.
They describe it as a psychological horror film with time travel elements. So I'm just interested in this. I mean, Anya Taylor-Joy, she's very interesting actress to watch. You've got Edgar Wright. I love a lot of his movies. They're more comedy based usually, but when he can do horror when he needs to. I mean, Shaun of the Dead proved that. So, I don't know. What do you think about this, LlaReyna?
Okay, the first thought that came to my head was, okay, do you hear nowadays of movie sets having curses on them? Because when you start linking things up, that's when you start getting these weird coincidences and quite possibly, the start of what could be cursed movie sets. But I don't know that I know of any. Well, we talked a little bit about how Krampus had a little bit of a curse, didn't it?
It had a little bit of a one, not like a huge one like maybe the one we're discussing today, but yeah, it had. It
was noticeable though.
It was noticeable. There were the people on the set definitely had some things going on that was more than just coincidence.
So yeah, that's the first thing that popped in my head when you were talking about Anya, and then you said her co-star Thomason. I'm like, okay, I'm not saying that that's going to cause a curse, okay? But I am saying that's a funny coincidence, and coincidences often lead to curses for some reason.
All they need, if it's a time travel element, is for her to go back in time, be on some kind of farm somewhere, and then there's an unruly goat.
Oh my God.
And then there you go. I mean, you've got a film.
Black Phillip. I would love a Black Phillip cameo. You know me.
Yeah, I don't know. I just that it seems like such a it seems like it could be a very cool movie. So I'm hoping that it turns out as it's got a good pedigree to it.
And it's coming out during spooky season. Now you said 2022.
2021 actually. It's supposed to come out in October of this year.
Spooky season this year.
Yeah.
Yay!
So let's hope and pray those theaters are back open. If not, then maybe they can at least we can stream it fairly quick to around spooky season and not have to wait too long on it.
Oh yeah. Okay, I'll be excited if I'll be even more excited if we can watch it in the theater. But honestly, I'll watch it any way I can. So
yeah, that's how I'm going to be with it. Speaking of another big movie, Ghostbusters Afterlife is finally set to release in November of this year, 2021.
Woo!
November 11th specifically. Nothing really more to cover about that. It's there's always the joke that it's Stranger Things Ghostbusters style, but that's when you get when you get what is it, Wolfhard or whatever that kid's name is, when you get him in something, it's always kind of Stranger Things. Even the new It movie.
Oh my God. See, I knew right away what you meant when you said that. I was like, oh, okay, that kid's going to be in the movie. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll take it.
Yeah, it's him. And
he's a good actor.
He is. I mean, he actually is been known to they respect him so much in Hollywood that they actually listen to his demands. He got somebody hired on one of his movie sets because he just demanded it, and they did it because they're like, yeah, he's this kid knows what he's doing, so let's get this person.
Wow, I just hope that it doesn't get to his head the way it has for other actors. I mean, for instance, Shia LaBeouf. He was a good kid actor, and look how that fucker turned out.
Oh yeah, let's hopefully we won't have Wolfhard, making videos where he's his eyes bugged out and he's screaming, "Just do it" or whatever,
Do it, just do it. That was so funny. Good entertainment. I'm not gonna lie.
Speaking of good entertainment, A Quiet Place Part 2 is set to come out in September of this year.
Okay, I haven't even watched part 1.
Oh my God. Okay.
And that was with what actor again?
John Krasinski is the one that was in the first movie.
Yes, okay.
He might be in the second movie, but that's all I'm going to say. You have to watch the first one to find out.
I heard it was really good, so why I haven't watched it is beyond me.
Yeah, so you heard it was or it wasn't good? I'm sorry.
I heard it was a good movie.
Oh, yeah. It's a good, actually it's one of the better movies I think that's came out. The only problem is that it's got a lot, the logic doesn't hold up if you think about it too much. So there's some frustrating things that way, and it's not one to really watch in a movie theater, even though I did, because a movie that's almost totally silent is made a lot worse whenever you hear people munching popcorn, like wrestling with cellophane bags, trying to tear open their gummy worms. I mean, it's, and slurping soda. It kind of gets annoying after a while.
It's funny because I relate this to, I know Bird Box came out, and I don't know which one came out first, if it was A Quiet Place or Bird Box, but you have this movie where you're not allowed to see, and then you got this movie where you have to be quiet, and I'm like, what is going on in this world?
I think Bird Box came out after, but I don't know which was. I mean, Bird Box could have been based on something, because I'm really not familiar with it, and it could have predated A Quiet Place, so I really don't know which one, but I know that Quiet Place beat it to the punch as far as like actually being a film.
Yes. So I really liked Bird Box. Speaking of that, so I mean that's me, and I know we could save that for another discussion. I don't know that it's discussion worthy, unless we were like mixing that with fucking A Quiet Place. Let's talk about movies where you can't do anything; you just have to sit there.
That might make a good double feature. That's actually not a bad idea. Movies where you have to stop one of your senses in order to be able to defeat the bad things in the movie or to get around them.
That would be hella fun, actually.
The last bit of news I have on here is that Eli Roth's History of Horror was picked up for a third season by AMC, and I think that's pretty good news because I've watched quite a bit on Shudder the first couple of seasons, and it's actually a very well done little documentary series for horror films.
Wait, what movie was this again?
Oh, it's actually a TV series called History of Horror, where Eli Roth.
Oh fuck!
Yeah, Eli Roth. He goes around to he basically he has like kind of in a vein like we're doing, but like more focused episode per episode. He does like one episode might be movies about hauntings, and he goes through like some of the big movies and kind of gets some of the directors and actors from those movies and kind of goes over things with them. And he's got like some of his friends like Rob Zombie and I don't know why I'm blanking on his name. The guy who does the visual effects for The Walking Dead, he gets him in there, and they kind of just sit around and talk about their favorite horror films within that genre and why they liked them and that sort of thing. It's a pretty good show.
I love Eli Roth. He has some of the most amazing horror. I don't know if you've ever heard from his childhood to how he got into movies and the people that have inspired him. He's got a pretty amazing story, and still I can't forget him as the Bear Jew.
That is probably one of his biggest scenes. I think when I think of Eli Roth, there's always one movie that I go back to, and it's just because the concept of the movie and how out there it was, it just stuck with me, the imagery in it, and that's cabin fever. Like if you see those scenes in that movie where just like skin is sloughing off these people, and oh my god, it's definitely one of those body horror movies. It's like the top of my list, like ones that stick with me.
Yeah, wasn't he in that movie too? Didn't he put himself in that movie?
He probably did. I mean, I'll be honest with you. Like, I don't really. I know when he puts himself into movies, like, oh, there he is, like, and then I forget about it. But yeah, he probably was in that movie. He was probably.
Oh yeah, he did. He played a character in there. He actually. Okay, so the reason why I brought this up, for some reason I thought it was Cabin in the Woods. Forgive me. Okay.
I almost said that, so I will forgive you because I had to sit there and check myself before I said it. So.
Yeah, but he put himself in this movie because the actor just, for whatever reason, he wasn't feeling right about how it was portraying, and he himself couldn't explain how he wanted this actor. He couldn't direct him for some reason, and so he pulled him out of the film, which is so rare to do, literally the day of, and he went and he filmed the part. And then as soon as he was done, he left to go film something for, Quentin Tarantino.
Did he film, Inglourious Bastards? Was that what he filmed right after that? Or was it another film for?
It must be. I don't know how many films of Quentin Tarantino's he's been in, but it was like his dream. Quentin Tarantino is one of his biggest, he's a big fanboy of him. So I'm not 100 on that. I'm sure eventually we'll get into that. I'm changing the subject back to what you were bringing up. I need to subscribe to Shudder because shame on me for not. First off. Second, I am so obsessed with Eli Roth and his history and, like I said, how he became such a horror fan and creating horror films. So that show that you're talking about, oh my God, History of Horror.
It's I don't know. I really like it, and he, even if you're not a fan of like some of his movies, because I know he veered off for a while and doing torture porn, with Hostel and all that. He has a definite love for the genre, because when he's sitting there discussing these movies with people, you can just see it in his eyes. He's not faking it all. Whenever he's like, just when he, talks about his love for all these different horror movies. I mean, it's 100% legitimate, and I respect him for that.
Yeah, and he's very well spoken too. When he's speaking, he knows it. Just he knows what he's talking about.
Oh yeah, he's definitely studied up on the genre. He knows. I mean, obviously from the film side of it, he knows the ins and outs of that, so he can speak to that, really well. It's a good series, and I really like whenever he's sitting down and he's going. I mean, especially those scenes where he's just around a table from, Rob Zombie and them, and just kind of going over it like some old buddies talking about, and they're all in the genre themselves and talking about other things they love within the genre. It's just great.
It's like a round table of just horror film creators.
It is, but then
fucking awesome.
But then it breaks off in the certain scenes, and he goes like he'll sit down with people specifically from the movies and kind of like get their take of how it was to film it, like what they liked about it and that sort of thing. Like he'll sit down with Linda Blair or somebody, and then kind of, and they'll discuss the movie, and it's really good.
I really love that because, in my opinion, it really brings the scene to life. You get to know behind it what the actor was feeling, how they brought that character into it, how they prepared themselves for it. And I don't know, it just makes the movie just like meatier for me, It
does. And another thing I like about it is a lot of cases on these, they'll discuss their own personal like feelings toward horror, like, like things that, they are scared of personally, and it's interesting. Like whenever you hear somebody who played like this evil character in a movie that that scares other people, talk about how they're afraid of, something you'd never think that they'd be afraid of. It's like, oh, like Freddy's afraid of that or whatever. It's one of those things. It's cool.
Mm-hmm. All right, what else do you got?
Well, as far as news goes, that's it. So if you're ready, I'm ready. I think it's time that we go ahead and discuss the movie for today.
Yes, I'm excited to discuss this.
So the movie that we're discussing today is Rosemary's Baby. Came out in 1968. Director and screenplay writer was Roman Polanski. We'll get into that here in a little bit. Producers were William Castle, big B-movie director. Anybody who knows anything about William Castle, some of his famous movies are The Tingler and House on Haunted Hill, and he was a schlock movie director. He was one of those guys that was known for he would put like little things in your seat during Tingler to like make the seat vibrate so it looks like you were getting shocked, just like the people in the movie. He was that kind of guy. That's how he got his scares. So
that's badass.
And he was almost the writer of this, and that'll be a little bit of trivia coming up. And the other person that helped produce this was Robert Evans, and he was the Paramount Studio exec that kind of brought everything together in this movie. And I definitely have to give the guy credit as far as producer. He made, when we get into some discussion behind the scenes, he definitely made the right calls as far as like who to get for which part and that sort of thing. I think. And of course, this movie was based upon a novel by Ira Levin, who literally, it was fast-tracked into a movie. Like, he had just made the book, like, just sent it out to Hollywood, like, within, like, a few months of it being produced. I don't even know if it was fully, like, actually published at that point. And it was
a newborn baby book.
it was, and, and the devil was with it, or some other power, because it got scooped up quicker than anything I've ever seen. I mean, they were making the movie of it within a year, so that's pretty good for him. I think before we go into the actual movie itself, though, there's some lore in this movie that I think would be interesting to kind of go over, and so I'm gonna leave that. I'm gonna throw it back over to you, LlaReyna, and kind of discuss some lore that might be involved with this.
Well, alrighty then. I guess you're ready for this. So here we go. Buckle up, bitches, because it gets pretty interesting. So I'm going to start with the building, which in the film was called the Bramford.
Mm-hmm.
And I found out, here's a little bit of trivia. I literally found this out today. There was some speculation on where they came up with the name of this building. And I think this is Ira Levin, you said, the person who wrote the book?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Okay. He was kind of upset. I don't know what the other speculation of what people thought this name came from, but he actually took the name from like kind of like a take on Bram Stoker.
Okay.
So that's you got the Bramford, Bram Stoker. Okay, so he kind of had that in there, and there's no like doubt when you see the outside of this building when they have like the aerial view of this. It's a gothic, dark looking building.
Yeah, I was just gonna say it's very dark looking. I mean, you know, it's one of those. You look at the building and it's a throwback to like Gothic architecture, and it's Victorian type things. I mean, there's definitely a reason why he chose that. It's the setting. Yeah,
and he couldn't have picked a better building. But there's something about this building. A lot of people say that it has a dark Gothic vibe that goes beyond just basically how it looks. So how it looks is basically how it feels. So the building they used was the famed Dakota, which I'm just going to skip right to, or not skip, but at least people know. And if they don't know, that is where, unfortunately, John Lennon lost his life. He was assassinated outside of the Dakota. So that's part of the history. We'll get into that. But I noticed a lot of things. Every now and then I just came across the number 7. Because we know that in the movie, they were on the 7th floor.
Okay.
I don't know if you recall that, but a lot of what was happening was on the 7th floor. This building was, I think the address is number 1, 72nd Street, I believe. I don't know if I got the number 1 part right, but I know it's on 72nd Street in New York. So there was that. So before, I guess we'll start with, John Lennon, who was friends actually with Mia Farrow. We know he lived at the Dakota, and how he came about living there was pretty interesting because it almost didn't happen. So he was visiting a friend literally at a next door building, like apartment buildings, and he really liked the area. He liked the vibe and everything. I mean, it's a fucking luxurious place of New York, And he was visiting this friend, him and Yoko Ono. He liked it so much. He wanted to live there, but there wasn't anything available. Okay, no shocker. So Yoko Ono and him had their assistant check next door at the Dakota. And it just so happened, now there's a gentleman by the name of Robert Ryan. He was famous in the 70s, and I'm not sure for what. I didn't look into it because I didn't want to veer off of the history too much. But unfortunately, he had just lost his wife, and they had lived there. She didn't die in the building, as far as I know, but he didn't want to live there anymore. So as they're asking, literally, he puts in his notice that he's leaving, and Yoko Ono and John Lennon put in their notice that, hey, they want to move if there's anything available. So they literally got in just by fucking chance. So that was pretty interesting. It's like it was meant to happen.
That's actually pretty similar to what happens in the actual book and film. So that's interesting.
Mm-hmm. So in 1972, 1973, I believe, they moved into this building on the 7th floor. There you go. Which is pretty interesting, okay?
Yeah.
In this building, so in his, it's like a co-op apartment. So basically what that means is that every person who lives there owns a portion of the building. So okay. I've heard co-op. I'm like, what the fuck is that? That's what we're dealing with.
Okay.
He practiced his songs in the basement. And in the basement, he wrote on the walls, Helter Skelter.
Oh, God.
We'll get into that.
Okay.
Okay. So he lived there pretty much from 1973 to 1980. I will skip forward to where, let me see. Where do I want to go with this history? This history is all over the place, and so was I. I know while he was I believe before he lived there, actually, in 1968. Not him, I shouldn't say him and Mia Farrow, but the Beatles and Mia Farrow were at some retreat in India. It's really famous. I mean, you hear about it all the time. You can tell their music was inspired by a lot of, I don't know, Indian background, if you will.
Oh, yeah.
And that while they were there, that's where he wrote the song Helter Skelter. So, not him, Paul McCartney and him. They both wrote the song Helter Skelter. Okay, so that was in 1968. Helter Skelter, let me see. I already read about the retreat. That was in 1968. Then, kind of skipping forward just a little bit more, and I will tie these timelines together just so it kind of makes a little bit more sense. It does and it doesn't. You'll see what I mean when I read the timeline out in order. Skipping to Roman Polanski, who was obviously the director of Rosemary's Baby, it seemed like the curse was more affecting people around him, and maybe not him so much. I mean, he's a cursed man for many reasons, and I didn't know if you were going to get into that or not, because I am not specifically going to.
It's
not for any particular reason. I just want to stick to the curse, the web of curse I have.
The only thing that needs to be brought up about Roman Polanski is the most obvious one, and the fact that he's no longer allowed in the United States, and that's because later on in his career, I think it was around the mid to late 70s, he was some accusations started rising, much like Harvey Weinstein, decades later, where he had been molesting or raping women, or using his power over the women, his position to have sex with them. And it just so happened that one of the many was underage at the time, and I think that was in France when that happened, and that got him some into trouble that way. So he escaped the United States, and if he ever comes back, he can be arrested for it, to my knowledge.
Oh, definitely. Yes. Well, actually, the underage girl, that was at a photo shoot in America that happened at Jack Nicholson's mansion.
Okay, well, and that...
I don't know if you knew that. And I was kind of wondering, I had never heard of Jack Nicholson. It doesn't seem like he got in any kind of trouble. I'm sure he had some answering to do, and if he didn't, I just found that to be very interesting.
That is interesting. That would have been... That goes into something we'll get into a little bit. I mean, but he did a movie with Roman Polanski called Chinatown, which is very famous, and for good reason. It's a great film, and that might have been around the time that happened. Because if they were, buddy, filming the movie together, I could see that, them palling around outside of the movie, and that could have been the time frame that this all happened.
Yeah, now, I mean, we know without a doubt Roman Polanski, he had some rough shit that happened. It doesn't excuse any of the things that he did. It's so disturbing that he's such a creative person. He's so good at his job. It's unfortunate the shit that happened to him, but it's also very unfortunate the shit that he's done. That's got him to where he's at. Yeah,
and I don't know. He had a meteoric rise, I mean, once he was discovered by Hour 11 for this film, at least in the United States, for good reason. I mean, the man's talented, and I don't know if that rise and maybe what happened, that we'll get into, maybe the combination, it all affected his mind a little bit. He get power hungry because he was so sought after. So, he was this big honored director. I mean, Mia Farrow to this day still talks about how great of a director he was as far as like working with him. So, I mean, it's not like, so
there's nothing wrong with bringing that out, despite what you know about the person. If that wasn't something that was at the time you experienced, yeah, you could say, what a dumb fuck for doing what he did. However, when we were together, this is how I was treated. He really did a good job of helping me do my job, and you can't deny that,
Yeah, and the only reason I bring it up is I just think that maybe, I mean, he was so talented, but he also had such a, he was such a big rising star that maybe some of that went to his head, because, I mean, he was just directing films in like Poland prior to this film, Rosemary's Baby. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I mean, that's for somebody to come from just making films and, in Poland to Hollywood and being like the Hollywood director, the rising star, some of that might have played into it. I mean, obviously, Sharon Tate, that's what we'll get into. But I mean, there was, he obviously had enough clout, and there was enough about him that he was able to, attract somebody as beautiful as she was. So, I mean, it was one of those things where I don't know, I can see that all going to somebody's head, especially if he was, I don't know how the man was prior to all this, but he could have been just like this nerdy film guy that, just suddenly was, everybody wanted to be around him. And, that kind of, that might have played into him thinking that he was a gift amongst men or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I do know that, yes, he was married to the very beautiful and young Sharon Tate. I mean, I hear that they had I don't know if I'm pronouncing this word right, tumultuous, a very shaky relationship in general.
Well, when they first started dating, right before they started dating, he is on record as saying that he didn't think that there was anything between them prior to them actually going out, because he thought she was ditzy and hard to work with, because they were on a movie together, which is where they met, called Fearless Vampire Killers, and he said that it took him a long time in that movie to get her to where she needed to be at as far as like her acting. So he wasn't he wasn't thrilled by her upon first sight. So I mean, they had some contention right from the get-go.
Yeah, I mean, she was young. That's all I can really attribute that to, is that she was 26 when she died.
Yeah.
Or I should say 26 when she was taken from this world. So,
yeah.
And they had known each other I think they had known each other a few years prior. So she had some growing up she had to do. So I can see that, being something I read. Who knows? Obviously, no one's here. Well, he's in a different, I don't think he's going to be defending himself from France. But, even when they were married, he was constantly cheating on her, allegedly. And she kind of just put up with it because she kind of liked her lifestyle. Allegedly. So I don't know. I don't know. There's a lot of hearsay. It's hard to say. You hear so many different stories no matter what you read.
And there's a lot of weird things as far as like her. I mean, she was actually engaged to another guy called Jay Sebring whenever she met Polanski, and just ended it and said, "I'm marrying Polanski," and that was it. I mean, they're Hollywood relationships. They're weird. So that's all you can say about that.
Definitely. So I don't think I have to go into the details of the Manson murders, but all you need to know basically is that, yes, Roman Polanski was married to her just a little over a year after Rosemary's Baby was released. So Rosemary's Baby was released June of 1968. So August of 1969, we know that the Manson family came in, murdered everybody who was in her house. No one got out alive. Obviously, Sharon Tate, who was pregnant, 8 months pregnant at the time with Polanski's baby. 2 days later, the Manson family strikes again. They killed a couple, Leno and Rosemary Bianca.
Wow.
I felt that interesting, that the lady's name was Rosemary.
Okay.
Yes, and after he murdered them, they misspelt the word helter-skelter in their blood on the wall. So let me see if I could piece this timeline together, because I messed up so many times putting this together, because I'm like, oh my God, this is here. No, this is here. No, this was first. No, this was first. But what we had first in 1968 was we had the retreat where the Beatles and Mia Farrow, which Mia Farrow and John Lennon were really good friends.
Okay.
That's where they were at. That's where the Beatles wrote the White Album, which included the song Helter Skelter. It goes on. It gets better. January of 1968, that's what it was, January of 1968. June of 1968 is where Rosemary's Baby was released. Okay?
Okay.
1973, so this is after Rosemary's Baby, obviously. John Lennon moves into the Dakota, and that's where we know he eventually writes the Helter Skelter on the basement wall. Before that, this is where I messed up the timeline. August of 1969 was the Manson murders, and then in 1973, he comes the Helter Skelter on the basement wall, even though the Helter Skelter song was written prior to the Manson murders.
Okay.
So, like I told you, this timeline gets all over the place.
Yeah, that's weird.
Yes. And then December of 1980, we know that John Lennon was killed. And at the Dakota, which is why I put that in there, because it's just how everything ties together to the movie. We're talking about the actors, the apartment building, the murders. It's just insane. Now, this was there's another little bit of trivia I found while researching this random shit related mostly to the building, but which also relates to the film. So a Helter Skelter, and I don't know if you're aware of this because I sure as fuck wasn't. It's like a fairground attraction. It's basically like a ride. And Paul McCartney kind of claims that he was using the symbol of a helter-skelter as a ride like from top to bottom, or in this case, rise and fall.
Okay.
And in the song, it was to basically indicate the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. It just got the name Roman in it. Okay, that's all I'm saying.
That's interesting. That
So
wow. Okay.
So I pieced all this random shit together, and I apologize that I kind of just, verbally just blurted this shit all over the place. But my mind was blown when I was listening and reading about this stuff. I'm like, are you fucking serious? That's way too many coincidences,
And there's one more thing that ties into all of that, and it was something that I accidentally heard on a Shudder program, bringing them back up about cursed films, and I was actually watching the one about The Omen of all things, and they had to bring up Rosemary's Baby, and I was hoping to go into this totally blank on the curse part of this, but the interesting thing is that whenever Lennon was killed by Mark David Chapman, Mark David Chapman had a split second where he was thinking about not going through with it. And apparently he was standing in front of the Bramford, or the Dakota, I guess, the real life version, and Mia Farrow walks right beside of him at the same time that he's having this like crisis of, should I do it? Should I not? And seeing her prompting in his mind all these links. It's like Roman Polanski, Sharon Tate, Manson, and then he thinks Helter Skelter, and it was like, that's my sign from God. I've got to go through with this.
Jesus Christ.
So literally Mia Farrow walking beside the Dakota at the same time that Mark David Chapman was thinking about not going through with killing Lennon was what prompted him to kill Lennon.
That's fucking insane. I didn't catch that.
Yeah, and
so this is like news to me.
And it's just like, it puts chills up your spine. It's like, why would all this stuff come together in like the place that it's just mind-boggling.
It could all be a coincidence, but that's some like crazy fucking coincidences.
And it's a coincidence. It's like built up over like what, 6 or 7 years or something. I mean, it's like, or at least 5. I mean, it's like it's not like immediate. It's not like all this stuff happened like bam, bam, bam. It's like, one little piece here, one little piece there, and it just all like, falls together at the last minute and then just leads to all this.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't find it to be a coincidence. I have a hard time believing that, after the Manson murders, which were in 1969, I have a hard time believing in 1973, John Lennon was thinking about that when he wrote Helter Skelter on his walls,
It's just weird that...
But it's just so weird.
And it's weird that he would do that after the fact. I mean, you would think that, I don't know, he might have been, bombed out of his mind on drugs or something, but there had to have been a part of him that's like, is this some bad taste? Somebody that I know tangentially. I mean, I don't know if he knew Roman Polanski, but a lot of people knew Sharon Tate at least. Should I be writing this on the wall given the history of it? I don't know. That's weird.
Maybe he felt like this. I created this. You can't take this away from me.
Yeah, maybe it was him trying to take it back. But the spooky thing about it is in the novel, which we'll get into, the basement is where Hutch, when he's given the history of the Bramford, which is the stand-in for the Dakota, the basement is the part where like somebody had left like a dead baby wrapped up in a newspaper, and it's the one thing.
Oh yeah,
and it's the one thing that prompts Rosemary, which we'll get into, to kind of, it starts her doom in the movie. That's where, because of her fear of the basement, it all kind of leads her down her path, and it's just spooky that he would choose the basement, the same spot, to do that.
Yeah, very, very interesting.
So, is there any more, I guess, curse that you've heard about? I mean, that's a pretty big one, but is there anything else related to that, or is there anything related to...
I mean, there's plenty more curses. We talked a little bit more about Roman Polanski's, bad luck. I do know on set, this is trivia, on set, did you know that Mia Farrow was served divorce papers by Frank Sinatra?
Yes. That
was funny.
And actually... It was during a part in the film, I think, where she's filming the pregnancy scenes. So, like, her just looking, like, run down, and, like, it was furthered by the fact that she was going through a divorce at the same time that she was filming all that.
Yeah, so that I found interesting. Hold on, I'm trying to see. Okay, and then one other thing I wanted to bring up, and this is kind of it for me, but not so much a curse, but Mia Farrow had a little bit of bad luck, and we know how she was with Woody Allen for a long time.
Uh-huh.
Well, yeah, 1980 to 1992. Isn't this this not spouse? I keep wanting to say it's her husband. I didn't realize they weren't married, but this is the one that ended up marrying their adopted child. Did you ever hear about that? Did you not know about this?
Oh, well, I knew about him doing that, but I didn't know. Was that the adopted child with Mia Farrow?
Yes.
Oh, my God. No, I didn't know that.
Yes. So he basically married, I mean, their daughter, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
So, I mean, it's just, I don't know. It's just weird. And I'm like, this woman had some fucking luck in her life, is all I got to say.
She definitely.
I know curses can affect people in different ways, but man.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
Well,
anyways, that's all I really have.
Okay. The one thing I want to say, to cap all that, is that specifically one of the actors in the movie, the one who plays Roman of all things, Sidney Blackmer. I'm going to go over the rest of some of the major players besides him, but he specifically said at the end of filming, whenever they got to the scene where they're saying "Hail Satan," "Hail Rosemary," all that, he looked at Roman Polanski and I believe his IR-11, and he said, "I don't like that we're saying this, and I believe this has cursed us."
Oh my God!
And I'll just that's the cap to that. So he did say it. They all said that he said that because he was the he plays the bad guy in the movie, like the bad guy, and like he was the one saying, he's like, I don't think we should be doing this, guys. That's so there you go.
They all did it in a very creepy way too.
Yeah, we'll get into that.
Like, the way some of the people were smiling, and I was like, ugh.
Well, let's just get into the movie.
Yeah.
The principal players in the movie we've already discussed. Mia Farrow plays Rosemary Woodhouse, main star of the movie. She was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Actress. She did not win the award that year, but she was nominated. Prior to this, she was known for being an actress on a TV show called Peyton Place. She hadn't really done any movies. She wasn't the actress that when Polanski was hired on that he actually wanted for the movie. Surprisingly, Tuesday Weld was the actress he wanted because he wanted more of a Midwestern, I think he said milk-fed vibe is the way he described it. He thought that...
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Went polar opposite, okay.
Yeah, and to his credit, that fits the book better because she is from, I believe, Omaha. She is, she's going to be a Midwestern girl. Like, if you go by, and funny thing is, IR-11 actually describes her through a scene with another character later on in the book, and the character remarks that she looks like a movie actress herself, but that Rosemary looks like a Laurie Piper, which is actually the actress who played Carrie's mom on the movie Carrie. So that if you can imagine what Carrie's mother looked like in that movie, that's what Rosemary is said to have looked like. A younger version, obviously, but Rosemary would have been that look as opposed to Mia Farrow, which is definitely a different look.
Dang. Okay, I want to say something real quick about Mia Farrow. Did she seem to have an accent to you in this film?
I don't know if I would say she has an accent. It's almost like a lack of one. It's kind of a strange...
Well, no, I can definitely see lack of an accent, especially if she's from Omaha. But I almost, okay, maybe I'm crazy, but to me, it seemed like she almost had like some sort of English accent of some sort, a broken one, not a great one.
Yeah, she might have. It was kind of weird. Like it wasn't anything you could place, and I don't know. It could have been intentional because honestly, IR-11, that's the reason he wanted her for the part, and he actually argued with Polanski and won, is because he thought that she was just so odd like her appearance, like not odd in a bad way. It's just there was something different about her, and that's
unique.
Yeah,
maybe.
Yeah, and that's what he wanted for the part. He wanted somebody who was. I mean, she has this. He called it left of center, not in a political sense, but just she wasn't like you look at her and it's like, oh, well, that's just some random person I see on the street. You don't look at Mia Farrow, at least not at that time period, and think that's. I mean, probably not even now because she still looks like she's out there, but in like an older hippie way. But like it's but it's like I can't disagree with him. Like you look at her, and especially, and I don't know if it was like the way she normally talked, but you're right. There's something about the way even she speaks in the movie. It's not like you're right.
Because I was like, is she? I thought maybe for a second she might have like actual English accent, but she was born in Los Angeles, Mia Farrow herself. And then when she was like, "Oh, he's from here and I'm from Omaha," I'm like, "You don't sound like you're from Omaha." Not to be rude, but okay.
The only person I know of, or that I've ever heard speak that I know is from Omaha is like Warren Buffett, and he definitely doesn't have Mia Farrow's accent in that movie. So
no, he certainly doesn't. Okay.
But yeah, it's kind of interesting. She wasn't the first choice. They wanted, Polanski wanted somebody more like in the book, but she works. The second major actor we have in this film is John Cassavetes, who plays Guy Woodhouse. And I've got to admit really quick that I was reading the list of actors and actresses on the actual, like this little thing that came with the Criterion Blu-ray. And I had a dumb moment where I was like reading through the names and I was like, okay, Mia Farrow, Rosemary Woodhouse. And then I read, John Cassavetes, and then I read, Guy Woodhouse. But the two didn't connect because I'm thinking Cassavetes, Cassavetes, Castavet.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, wait a minute.
I thought about that too.
And I was like, wait a minute. Okay, that's one of the people that, is one of the actors that's playing like the couple next door, but who's actually playing Guy? And then it dawned on me. It's like, they got a guy with a last name very similar to the actual characters in the film. So I thought that was kind of weird. But anyways, John Cassavetes was a director himself. He was in the movie Dirty Dozen as an actor, and that was one of his big roles. And then he was, for horror fans, he was also in a movie later called Incubus, which came out in 1982, which I don't know if that was him trying to play off his fame in Rosemary's Baby, but it's kind of funny that he's in a film about a hyped up sexual demon. So... a little interesting tidbit about him. He was also not the actor that was wanted for the part. They actually wanted Robert Redford to be in the role, and that was even Robert Evans. I keep saying the wrong name. Robert Evans, the studio exec, was actually the one who wanted Robert Redford in the film because they all felt like the Robert Redford fit the part better. And if you read the book, I got to admit, if you go look back and look at pictures of a young Robert Redford, he actually does look like what my mind filled in whenever I was reading the book of what Guy Woodhouse would have looked like. Kind of this all-American, like strapping, Hollywood type. I didn't get that vibe from John Cassavetes. He does not look like what you would think is like somebody who's an aspiring Hollywood,
No, he gave me a Bronx kind of, I don't know, like a tough guy vibe.
He almost, this is weird, he almost gave me the same vibe as the guy who played, and I don't know why I'm blanking on the father in The Exorcist, the one who was that kills himself at the end of the film to save the main character. He's got a similar look to him, as that guy. It's one of those things.
Yeah, I'm telling you, they have that tough New Yorker vibe. Rocky Balboa.
yeah, it's one of those. I don't know. Whenever I heard Robert Redford, I was like, yeah, that's who I would have cast if I was just like not. And when you go back and look at him, he looks like what Ira Levin actually described in a novel. But anyways, they ended up. A little bit of another trivia, they ended up clashing during the film, him and Polanski, because they have two totally different styles, both being directors and actors in their own rights. They had two totally different ways of directing, and they clashed over it because Cassavetes was more about improv. He would have been probably, happier with, like some of the, like movies like, This Is 40 or something like that, where they just all the time improv and, kind of get their jokes that sort of way. John Apatow, that type of film. He was like that kind of an actor or director. He wanted you to just come up on the fly with what you thought your character would say. And Polanski's a total opposite. It's like he knows what he wants. He knows how it's supposed to look. He wants you standing in the right spot. He wants you, doing just what he wants. And if you don't do it, he's going to make you redo it until you do what he thinks that it should look like. So they really got on each other's nerves. To the point where they didn't even talk toward the end of the film. Like it was just like when they came on the scene, they did what they had to do, and that was it.
I mean, like, I guess that's the kind of actress I would be if I were ever to be an actress. Hollywood, I'm available. Call me. But is that if a director is telling me what to do, I'm on their film. I'm gonna do what they're telling me to do, and I'm gonna try to do it the way they want me to do it to try to make things go as smoothly as possible. And I guess maybe if you're a more famed actor or actress, maybe you can kind of give suggestions. We know that actors and actresses do that in in television shows if they've been there for a long time. For instance, Supernatural, where you had Jared Padalecki and Jensen Ackles that were eventually producing and sometimes directing and kind of giving their input and then negotiating. That's fine, but I mean, how established was he at this point in his career?
Cassavetes was pretty established, and that might have been part of the reason why he was such a pain in Polanski's ass, is because Polanski, this was his first film. I mean, he...
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
And, Cassavetes had done... I mean, not that Cassavetes was a big-time director, but, I mean, he'd done enough to where, it was like... And the funny thing is that he was a hire because of Polanski. Polanski knew the guy. He was friends with him, before this film.
They were good friends prior.
Yeah, and so it was one of those things where, let me get my buddy in this movie since we can't get Redford, because, Redford at the time, going back to him, he was set to do the movie, I think, or they were going to ask him, but then he had like this big blow up of Paramount, and he just walked off, and they never heard from him again as far as working with that studio. So that's the reason they had to go with somebody else last minute. So it's kind of interesting that, and I don't know if, I mean, they knew each other, but I guess it was one of those things where it's like, they were fine as friends, but they just couldn't actually work together.
Well, I would say despite the differences, in my opinion, it worked well in the film because Guy plays an asshole. And I think that vibe that I told you he gives me, that Bronx tough guy, vibe, I think it really worked for what he was supposed to be doing. Even in where he was trying to show genuine emotion, I think he portrayed it very well.
He did, and he brought something else to it, and that's, I guess we'll bring it up now. I mean, it's part of the discussion of the film, but there's two things I noticed whenever I saw him. Right off the bat, when you see him in the first scene, where he's in there, he's got this, I'm always looking to the future. I'm not focused on anything immediately in front of me because I'm always striving to, to be more famous and that sort of thing, which is what the character's doing. He's got that vibe going on for him pretty well, and he's got that I just don't give a shit, like I'm a cocky, just throw things out there kind of comedian type vibe to him. And I think that Cassavetes brought that to the role himself. I think because I didn't really get that out of the character so much in the he was a little bit like that in the book, but not the way that he portrayed him in the movie. And I think what you're saying, like, his look and, some of his mannerisms and the fact that he wanted to improv and just kind of, fly off his cuff all the time, I think that he brought that to the character to kind of make Guy Woodhouse more of like a, well, whatever. I don't care about any of this, shit that you care about, Rosemary. It's, like, I'm just here for, to get fame, wealth and fame. That's what I'm here for, so...
Well, and the way I look at it too is you got to remember this was a time where the woman generally stayed home, and she was a homemaker. That was what their jobs were, and he's providing. And these were times where women didn't really have the liberty to just speak back. They didn't have a foot to kind of say, no, this is how things need to go. We had some growing to do still. So, I keep trying to remember that when I'm watching this, and I'm thinking, why don't you just stab him?
Well,
why don't you get that frying pan and hit him over the head with it?
And that's actually, people have brought that up about Ira Levin's intent in the actual book, is that, I mean, you get to the point later on in the movie where, like, they literally, between him and the Castavets. I mean, they literally lock Rosemary into her apartment. They won't let her leave. They're like, oh, we'll do everything for you. You got that baby to look after. You just stay where you're supposed to be at in the home. That's kind of that's meant to be there. Is like, the way of saying that, whatever you want to call it, the patriarchy or, society at large was keeping women, whether they wanted to be there or not, they were being forced to be in the household and like their struggle to get out of it. So that's an underlying, theme that was kind of in the book, and Polanski pulled out and put in the movie, because I got to give him credit. I mean, I'm just going to say it up front, this is probably the best book to film adaptation that I've ever seen, because he took like the gist of the story, boiled it down into a movie, and didn't lose anything in the process. So another thing to give him credit for with his talent, he literally knows how to write a screenplay from and did one of the best book adaptations that's out there. But that was a theme that was in the book. It was like, one of those things where it's like, women were struggling. They wanted to get out there, be part of the workplace and that sort of thing. And it was like, here society was keeping Rosemary locked up in her apartment. It's like, you can't leave. What are you doing? You're a woman. Stay in the apartment.
Stay in your lane.
Yeah, basically. So the next character we have in the movie is Maurice Evans, the next actor who plays Hutch. He was in Planet of the Apes. He played Dr. Zaius in that, a pretty big role. He played in Bewitched, which is funny. He played Samantha's father. And he played in, for horror film buffs, he played in Terror in the Wax Museum and The Body Stealers. Ruth Gordon played Minnie Castavet. She was in a lot of like different like older films and that sort of thing. She was like an older actress at the time this was made, so a lot of her prime was behind her, a lot of film noir and that sort of thing. That's kind of what was, her big thing. But it's funny, she would later go on after this movie to star or to be in the main role of a movie called Whatever Happened to Aunt Alice. And I don't know if you ever heard of a movie called Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. It's a movie basically about like an aging woman who's like, in this death struggle with her like daughter and that sort of thing. And like I believe, I can't remember what they called, like this was like a play on that. And it was like I think they called it like the Revenge of the Biddies or something like that, like series of films. It was like all these old actresses that were like these old crones that were like, going out and like committing murder to people.
What the hell?
Yeah, it was like the movie that she was in, Whatever Happened to Aunt Alice. She's a widow that cons elderly housekeepers out of their money and then kills them. Like she'll get them out to her place. Hey, take care of me. I'm so feeble. And then like, kill them and, like take their money and kill them. So it just, I don't know. I just thought it was kind of funny when I saw that she was in that movie. I was like, wait, I've heard of Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. What the hell is this movie about?
Yeah. What the hell, dude?
She was actually hired because she looked like a drawing that Roman Polanski gave his hiring department, for like backup actors, like supporting cast. Literally, she was hired because she looked like what he drew. I don't know if that was
okay. And I'm sorry, but her makeup looked like paint, so she looked like a drawing in the film too.
There's a scene later on in the movie where we first see her, the very first scene where we see Roman and Minnie Castavet walk up, and I always in my mind I say, okay, here comes the clown and the pimp, because that's literally what it looks like.
That's what I was thinking.
She's got all this bright makeup on. It's like terribly done, and it's just like, okay.
Oh my God, it's so horribly done. But you know what? That is how an older person would do their makeup, especially in those times, because the vibrant colors she had, it was pretty popular.
Yeah, they had those.
I don't know.
They had those bright '60s clothes on that just like looked at them and you nearly went blind or something. It was like kind of crazy, but.
Oh my God!
Their
acting got better. Minnie and Minnie and Roman. I'll just say their character names. Their acting got better in the film, because that first scene, their acting was fucking terrible.
Yeah, it was. I thought it was pretty bad.
Unless it was meant to be where like, oh no, she died, and they're supposed to look suspicious. I could see that totally working, because obviously they're behind it in some sort of way, as we find out later on. Well, we don't find out they're exactly behind it, but. There had to be something going on.
It might have been intentional because Roman Polanski's that way. I mean, like we established with him fighting with John Cassavetes or whatever. So, but it's one of those things where I think that might have been intentional in the fact that it was like they're the type of people who they cover up their like satanic cult, but like not really, like they don't give a shit if anybody finds out about them because they've got a lot of wealthy people behind them. Honestly, when you get right down to it, powerful wealthy people. So they, it's like, oh no, she died. It's like one of those things. It's like because there's a scene later on when Rosemary's having her dream, and there's a nun speaking because that's the way she internalizes hearing Minnie through the wall, and Minnie's basically talking to Roman, and she's like, well, I told you we didn't have to have a drugged out whore to do this. It could have been anybody. So it was like they really didn't give a shit about her. So it was like one of those things where maybe it was good acting. Maybe that was the way they were supposed to have come off. It was just like uncaring.
Yeah, that's the way they were supposed to. Like I said, it makes sense, but if they're trying to portray someone who is feeling remorse or anything or feeling bad, I was like, ew, this is very Kmart,
There was a scene, I gotta say this, there was a scene that Mia Farrow like comments on and, lauding, Ruth Gordon's acting in the movie. She mentions at the end of the movie when Rosemary is like sitting there and Rosemary, or like, well, she's not sitting there, but she like is so shocked that she drops the knife that she has in her hand because she's just seen the baby. She's, seen the cult, operating, fully for the first time, and she said, oh my god, all that, and like she just, she's just so shocked she drops the knife she has in her hand and it sticks in the floor, which she said she had to do a bunch of times because it had to stick perfectly, going back to Polanski's, like, it has to be perfect. But anyways, she said that little scene where Minnie walks over, picks the knife up, like jerks it out of the floor, and then kind of like, takes her finger and like tries to wipe away the chip in the floor, was like totally improvised. And she said that was her favorite scene because she said it perfectly summed up Minnie Castevet, like for her, as far as a character, was like her, like, oh shit, you found out about the demon baby in our cult, but you fucked my floor up, so let me wipe this off a little bit, It's
I'm not gonna lie, that scene sticks out to me so much, so I have to say that's my favorite scene too, because I'm like, what are you gonna do? Are your witchy powers going to fix that? Fucking dent in the floor now?
Yeah.
I loved it.
Yeah, so I thought that was pretty good. I was like, yeah, she has a point. That is pretty good. Sidney Blackmer is the actor who plays Roman Castevet. Again, the pimp in the film. It's funny because he was known for like westerns like way back before this. It's kind of funny that he, like him playing a character like this. And again, he was the guy that at the end of the movie, it's like, I don't know, this hell Satan stuff. We might have cursed ourselves, guys. Like it's it's just kind of funny that Roman Castevet is the one that had to say that.
I was listening to another podcast talking about this film, and one of the girls is Catholic. I mean, so am I. And every time her co-host said "Hail Satan," she would freak out, and I'm like, calm down. Your negative energy is gonna give that word power. Like, calm down.
Yeah, what?
It's just the movie.
Yeah, she's manifesting some stuff at that point if she's giving it that much power.
Tell me about it.
To round out the main cast, Ralph Bellamy is the one who plays Dr. Abe Saperstein. Probably one of the biggest assholes in this movie outside of Guy Woodhouse.
Fucking hated him.
Oh my god. It's funny, as far as like horror fans goes, this guy was in a ton of shit. He was like in the original Wolfman movie, the old one. He was in The Ghost of Frankenstein. That was, like the third or fourth like sequel to the Frankenstein films. The funny, and a couple of funny things about him. He was one of the old fucking assholes in Trading Places. I don't know if you remember seeing that movie.
I love that movie. There's a memes coming out about that movie right now because of the whole
Wall Street
market shit going on. So yes, okay. So moving on from that though, yes.
Yeah. I just love the fact that he's the same guy I did not know, and I was like, wait a minute, he is one of those fucking assholes. It's like, do you think we should do this, Mortimer? He's what? Oh my god! And I think they've got a cameo at the end of Coming to America where where the main character like hands them like a dollar bill, and like they're like, we're back in business, we finally made it, because they lost all their fortune in Trading Places. It's I don't know, it's just kind of funny that he was in that. And then he, of all movies, he was in Oh God with oh man, what's his? There was an act. I'm trying to think of the actor's name. Was it George Burns? I believe was his name. Like, let's see what we got here. Yeah, George Burns. Did you ever see those films?
Mm-mm.
It's.
I don't think I did. I'm looking at it right now, and I'm like, why does this? It looks familiar to me.
It's kind of funny that it's like George Burns plays basically God in the movie, and it was kind of like one of those movies before, before the one that Jim Carrey did, and that sort of thing. It was.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Evan Almighty and Bruce Almighty.
Bruce Almighty, yeah. It was one of those films before that where it was just like, he's like this old codger that, and there's like a sequel he makes called Oh God, You Devil, and like he plays God and the devil in that. So I just thought it was funny that, Bellamy went on to be in like that series of films after he did this, of all things. It's just kind of, a weird twist.
He did a lot of films. I see he was in Pretty Woman as well, and I was looking to see who he was, and I remember the scene pretty well. And I'm like, holy shit, he was in a lot of films. Good actor. He sold me on that evil Dr. Saperstein very well. But, as a woman who has had children and has had to see, an OBGYN while pregnant, there are doctors that I swear to God are just like he was. I remember having at least one, and I switched real fast. I was like, no, I'm not sticking with this doctor.
Well, and that's the thing that I don't know that I thought was interesting about the film. It's like, I don't know which doctor is worse. You've got Saperstein, who's the asshole that's like, don't listen to your family and your friends. I'm the doctor. I know what, pregnancies are. They're all different, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, what an asshole statement. And then, then you've got Dr. Hill later, who just basically doesn't believe anything Rosemary says about a pregnancy and just turns her over back to Saperstein. So Hill's probably worse.
Yeah. I mean, yes and no, because she fucking sounded crazy. And if I were going through something like this, I put myself in that situation. Okay, look, and my daughter too, because she's like, she could have just said, I'm being followed and I'm scared and I want to have this baby privately. Like, even my 13-year-old is thinking logically. But of course, you can't go that route because of the film. I mean, the scene was such a good scene where Dr. Hill does this to her that I would not have it removed from the film, only because it gets your blood boiling more. And then, of course, it leads to what happens afterwards, which is, I mean, it just makes the film so much better the way it was. But yeah, I don't know, one of my friends that I love dearly came to me and was like, oh my God, okay, so there's this coven of witches and there's this baby inside of me, and I don't think it's the devil inside of me. And I'd be like, okay. I probably wouldn't contact anybody that they're running from. I would just be like, okay, maybe there's some danger, but maybe it's not what she's saying it is.
I understand.
I don't know. It was a little crazy how she went off.
It was, and we'll get into that. It was intentional from Polanski, but the thing is that, and I don't know, maybe it's because of the things that they part of being the healthcare field, they, trained us. It's one of those things where they, it's like he's totally, he is, trying to look out for her as far as her mental health. He thinks she might be a danger to herself and her baby, and I understand that aspect of it. But she tells him up to that point that she thinks her husband has ill intentions toward her. And as healthcare professionals now, and that's probably, that's definitely a sign of the times, the change. Definitely. It's weird looking back, and it's like if you were Dr. Hill now, your training would be, okay, if you think the husband might be a danger as well, hey, we definitely need to keep him out of the loop on this. Let's see who else we can get in contact with, that might be an option, because we don't want to put, her in a situation where she's going back to an abusive husband. So,
Definitely. It gave me the vibe, though, that Dr. Hill was involved in some sort of way. And I know practitioners are friends with practitioners and stuff like that. Like, I get it, maybe he didn't know what Dr. Saperstein was about, but he knows that he's an elite doctor. So talking ill of somebody like that is like, you're talking about my friend, and you don't know what really is going on. It could have just been like, hey, you're the proper doctor. I'm doing the right thing, Well,
and they do, and going to your point, they've established in the film by that point that Saperstein is actually, he is an expert, or at least somebody highly sought after in his field, because even Hutch, says that my daughters, had their babies delivered by Saperstein. So it's not like Saperstein is a well-known entity. I mean, other OBGYNs in the city would respect him. They would, acknowledge him being, top of his field. So the movie even establishes he's credible as far as that, that goes. So there is some validity to that argument.
Definitely. Any other characters we're discussing?
That was the primary ones that I felt like were the crux of the movie. There's Laura Louise. I didn't look up the actress who played her, but she's just a total bitch in the movie. Like every little snide thing that she can say. And she's, it's funny in the one little tidbit from the books that I wish would have been made into the movie is there's a scene where Laura Louise comes over and she's like, she's crocheting. I mean, there's a scene in the movie where she's crocheting with Minnie and Rosemary, but there's another scene in the book where, because they do this several times, and she's crocheting like little booties for, the baby. And Rosemary makes the, observation, hey, those are shaped weird because they're shaped like more of a hoof. Like they would cover that. And Laura Louise just gives a look like, oh, honey, it's all right. I know what I'm doing. So it's just kind of like a funny little scene that they throw in the book that I wish would have gotten the movie. But, it goes back to, and I guess I should just throw that out there now. Polanski wanted this movie to be to where you doubted Rosemary as like her authenticity, like her, I guess her where she was at mentally. He never said in the documentary that was on the Blu-ray, he says he was agnostic when he filmed this. He doesn't say he's still agnostic. He might be atheist. He might be fully religious now after what happened to him. I don't know. That's on him. But he was agnostic when he made this, so he did not want the book to translate as religiously, into the film as what it did. He didn't want it to be so stark, like this is definitely the baby, of the devil and that sort of thing. So he wanted you to doubt Rosemary. And
which is it shows, because I started to doubt her a little bit. Like, okay, I mean, I knew how it ended, but I was still like, ooh, she's talking crazy talk.
I mean, we can get this criticism right now. Like, I think you said your kids, watched this and they were kind of pissed off about how it was, like how it ended. As far as like you don't see the baby. Mm-hmm. And I think that goes back into Polanski deliberately. It's like, well, the baby could have been fine. It was just Rosemary, suffering from...
It could have been all in her head.
Yeah, postpartum depression's a real thing. She could have been, and it makes women do horrible things, because they're such, in such a state. So she might have been, like that disconnected feeling you have from your child whenever you're going through it and you feel like it's an alien creature, and that sort of thing. I could see, he worked that into the movie, and he doesn't show you the baby because he doesn't want, deliberately say that it's, the spawn of Satan. It could just be a regular baby, and she just has all this going on, and she is, she is like, that's not my baby. What is this thing? It's like that kind of goes with that.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And then, like you said, the scenes where she's kind of a crazy person talking to Dr. Hill, that could just all be in her head. And hormones fuck you up big time.
Oh yeah. It's while you're pregnant, and even worse afterwards, because your body's trying to get back to what it was before, and oh man, is it a roller coaster? It's a helter skelter.
The rise and the fall.
I just came up with that right now.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
If you enjoyed this episode of Rosemary's Baby Part 1, please join us again for Part 2, coming soon on Death Holler. Death Holler is brought to you by Blue Collar BS, with your host, Reverend Dr. Death and LlaReyna. Please like, subscribe, follow, and share. We'll catch you next time. Don't forget to bring your death certificate.